Storm clouds gather over the border princes, unnoticed by the reclusive wizard engrossed in the study of profound discovery in ancient crystal of elven origin. Gotta read faster. This will be our next game. Warhammer Storm. Or what is it? Something of the Horned Rat, I think it's called. I forget. As you can tell, it's ancient. I think it was like in the 90s is when this came out.
Prepare to die, Superman. Looks like it's a monster.
Shadow of the Horned Rat. That's what it was called. I could not remember. Alright, so it's coming back to me now. Warhammer, Shadow of the Horned Rat. Worst introduction ever in terms of my part. Not bad for an introduction on the game given its age. So, funny story about this game is I actually owned this on PlayStation 1 when I was in like 5th grade or something. And I got it from one of the kids at school. I bought it for like $10 or something like that. And there was another kid at school that was like knew what Warhammer was, because I had no idea. I thought this was just like some medieval thing, and didn't know it had all this whole background stuff. So I had no idea about what any of these characters or anything in this game meant. But he used to give me like his lunch money and as like a rental fee, kind of like what you do at Blockbuster or something. And he'd have this the game. I was like, I'll just give it to you for like $8, and he's like, no, I'm gonna beat it. But this game is like crazy hard, or at least it was back then. Who knows? I was a little kid, so maybe the game will be easy itself. But I remember it being incredibly hard, and I think I only beat it when I started cheating on it, because you can get all these like free units and stuff if you cheated on the PlayStation. But I'll be curious to see what it's like now that I'm a little bit older. Alright, so I'm gonna read the introduction here. I have the manual. It's like 123 pages. I'm not reading all 123 pages, don't worry about that. But there is like 12 pages. It starts off with kind of a generic Warhammer lore, because the game assumes that nobody knows what Warhammer is, given the lack of real history and popularity that it had back in the 90s. And then finally it goes into kind of a little background story about your units, so you have kind of a preface to kind of know where the game starts from, because it's kind of jarring jumping right into it. You don't quite have a lot of the backstory. So I'll get started here. I did turn off the music as well. I've been having a lot of troubles with the recording on this game. Now you'll notice a couple episodes I have the music back on. You can barely hear what I'm saying. Unfortunately, with this old game, it's pretty much music's on, music's off. I've tried to adjust the sliders on the recording software, but it's still, there's just a wide variance in the music, and sometimes it's blasting and you can't hear anything. Other times it's low and everything's fine. And because I'm changing the volume, it keeps messing it up. And for whatever reason, with this older game, when I'm trying to record it, I can't see any of the recordings because it like crashes my recording software occasionally. So I'm going to have to redo this part. So hopefully this is going to work. So the first couple episodes might be pretty jarring and kind of difficult to hear, but I suspect I'm going to have to keep the music off. And so I'll see what the audio quality for that is. So like I said, for the first several episodes, there may be a lot of variation in the audio, so I apologize for that. That's a lot of technical difficulties just trying to get this game to run on my computer, since it's quite an old game and there's lots of issues. I had to make a lot of changes to things so far, but I think I finally got it figured out. So, alright, so basic history here. Warhammer world. We're going to start on page 14 of the introduction here and the manual. So if you want, maybe skip ahead. I expect it'll probably take somewhere around 30 minutes to probably read everything. The very last part is actually where the introduction to the game is, so you may want to skip around to the end if you kind of already know a lot of the Warhammer lore, because this may be redundant for you. But I'm finding as I'm reading some of these things, I actually have a little more understanding of the Warhammer world. I know a bit about the Warhammer 40k, but really minimal knowledge about Warhammer itself. So the Warhammer world. In the war-torn world of Warhammer, mighty armies clash to decide the fate of the Imperial realms. Brave warriors march forward, accompanied by terrifying monsters and devastating machines of war. Heroes brandish magical weapons glittering with the arcane energies. Powerful wizards cast destructive and furious spells upon the enemy. Swords clash upon shields, spears raised to strike, and clouds of arrows darken the sky. Elves. Few races known to the Warhammer world as well as the High Elves, for their fleets ply the northern oceans between the Old World in the east and Ulthuan in the west. Still further west, their war fleets maintain a careful watch over the passage of Naggaroth, the realm of the Dark Elves. Nor are the High Elves strangers to the warm waters south in the jungle-infested coast of Lustria. Their bravest traders have traveled even further past the tip of the Southlands and into the mysterious Far East. To men, the lands of the East are known only as Cathay, I think, and they are much a part of the fable of the Black Pits of the Dark Lands which lie between. The Old World. The Old World is home to the men, dwarves, wood elves, and halflings. It is also home to many creatures of evil that are their enemies, orcs, goblins, and the followers of chaos in their various guises. The high mountains and deep forests are infested with many monsters, and the northern regions are so wild and dangerous that they are known as Troll Country. Beyond the Troll Country lie the northern wastes, where there is only the shifting realm of chaos. The Old World is bounded by the World's Edge Mountains to the east and by the Great Western Ocean to the west. The northern coast lies against the Sea of Claws. On the other side, which is Norsca, the home of fierce sea-fighting monsters and raiders. The southern coast lies against the Southern Sea, which divides the Old World from the Southlands and the realms of Araby. The Old World stands in the path of the armies of chaos as they advance southwards from the northern waste. It also lies within striking distance of the raiding fleets of the Dark Elves of Naggaroth, which sweep through the seas of chaos and attack the northern coast of the Old World, often in concert with raiding bands of chaos warriors from the north. So I wonder if that means the Dark Elves and Chaos actually work together, or if it's just coincidental that they're saying that they'll attack together. Within the Old World, the border princes to the south lie under constant threat from the orcs and goblin raids from the Badlands, so called on account of it being dominated by their interwarring tribes. To the men of the Old World, the lands of the far south, east, and west remain mysterious and exciting. For centuries, ships of Bretonnia and Norsca have sailed west, hoping to discover the lands of the elves and the ports of the Dark Elves. For centuries, they were thwarted. The northern passage through the Sea of Chaos proved too dangerous, and the ships were destroyed like matchwood beneath the jaws and coils of serpents that guard the Dark Elf lands. The southern passage too was guarded, but this time by the High Elves, who regard the sea passages as their territory, out of bounds to other travelers. Such arrogance is not untypical for the High Elves. For many years they succeeded in driving ships of men away, or else wrecking them on the rocky shores. Those few that have chanced upon Ulthuan were destroyed by the elves, and no report ever came back of their fate. However, the persistence of the Norskins is legendary, and eventually a way was found past the elven kingdoms of Ulthuan to the rich lands of gold and silver beyond. Even today, it is only the brave and adventurous that travel to the lands known as Lustria to explore the treasure-packed ruins of the land. The discovery of Lustria has been made, but exploration and study has only begun. The sea journey itself takes many months, and not all survive the trip. The High Elves still regard the seas of around Ulthuan as exclusively theirs, and will attack and destroy any who trespass nearby. The discovery of a route into the south of men of the Old World has begun to map the coasts of the Southlands and Lustria, though to date they have discovered nothing but jungle and savage natives. No Old Worlder has yet rounded the southern tip of the Southlands, and rumor tells of a mighty high elf fortress that bars passage eastwards once the southern route itself was blocked. The threat of chaos. The Warhammer world lies constantly under the threat of dark corrupting presence of chaos. To the people of the Warhammer world, chaos is a real and growing horror. Its dangers are twofold. Chaos is born from a potent magic energy that seeps over the world like a slow poison, polluting the land and fouling the waters. This raw energy is the same stuff that powers magic and enables wizards to cast their spells. All magic is therefore dangerous and potentially corrupting, no matter what the intentions of its practitioners. The presence of so much magic chaos energy in the Warhammer world causes mutations and twisted monsters to be born, creatures with many heads and scaly skins, fiery breath, and other foul and unnatural powers. The second and most obvious danger of chaos comes from these creatures. Some are mutants born to men and other normal creatures. Others are monster races spawned long ago from twisted progeny. Half-human beastmen hide in the deep forests from where they emerge to burn and destroy. Like a rat-like Skaven burrow beneath the world, spreading the corruption of chaos unseen, while the northern wastes these creatures breed and multiply unchecked. And it looks like there's a random quote here. Beneath the world there are darker things than all the fear and terror man can conjure. Things as black as darkest hate. They do hate us, and they want to destroy us. They gnaw beneath our cities. They crawl under our houses. They hew and mine at the very earth beneath our feet. They pray for our doom. They conjure foul demons to crush us. They amass armies of darkness and pestilence unseen. That, my students, is but the least of our troubles. And that's from a lecture at the College of Magic, I'm guessing. The power of chaos is greatest in the Northlands towards the polar regions of Warhammer world. Here the energy of chaos is so strong that the whole fabric of reality has broken down so that even time has no meaning. This is known as the realm of chaos. It is a shifting and unstable place whose topography is never certain and whose distances cannot be measured. Demons of all manner of obscene monsters roam here, fighting their own bloody battles and gathering their strength to invade the old world. Although it may seem hard to believe, there are men and other rational creatures who willingly embrace chaos by joining marauding bands of chaos warriors to serve the whimsical and ultimately powerful gods of chaos. Their reward is power, for they mutate and become more powerful, and the most successful of all may gain the ultimate gift of immortality. Few ever attain this goal, but most become so heavily mutated that their minds and bodies are destroyed. These chaos spawn, as such mutants are called, may be nothing more than the writhing mass of mutant tentacles and bloated organs spilling onto the ground. No vestige of their former life remains except a vague memory of the humanity they have gambled and lost. So what I don't understand about the chaos spawn, and maybe somebody can tell me, is so you get these mutations that make you powerful, but at what point does it like flip where you get in too much mutation? Is it like you're angering the chaos gods and then they punish you by just giving you the rest of the mutations and you just instantly warp into a chaos spawn? Or do you keep asking for mutations hoping you're going to get stronger and then eventually you just can't like cognitively handle it and then you end up mutating into a chaos spawn because you can't handle the gifts that they're bestowing on you? Just because of your limitations, or is it the chaos gods themselves are just like, okay, we thought you were gonna do something, but now you let us down. We're just gonna give you all these mutations, and now you're just screwed. And now you can just become this massive abomination that just fights and then dies pretty much. The winds of magic. The high mages of Ulthuan, the greatest island of elven kingdoms teach that there are not one but two realities. The first is a commonplace world we all live in, the world of tangible things, living creatures and plants, water and rocks and air, things made of material substance. Coexisting with our solid familiar world is a completely different reality, a world whose fabric consists of raw power. It too has its landscapes and its living creatures, but their forms are fashioned from solid energy. This second world, the great unseen domain that coexists with the material world, is the source of all magic, and it's known as the world of chaos. It provides wizards with the power for their conjuration and imbues magic weapons and other enchanted items with their potency, and energies course through the supernatural creatures such as ghosts and the undead. Battle magic is the preserve of the battle wizards who are trained to use devastating battle magic spells. Not all wizards have the right temperament or skill to become a battle wizard, as the energies involved are tremendous and far beyond the capability of most wizards to control. In fact, battle wizards are so rare and valuable that there's an institution in Altdorf exclusively devoted to their education and training. This is the world-renowned College of Magic, where the majority of the battle wizards in the Old World are trained. The colleges of magic play a pivotal role in all matters concerning the magic in the Old World. The Warhammer world is awash with magical energy, whose whole fabric is seeped in power, and the very skies are thick and billowing clouds of invisible energy. These clouds, known as the winds of magic, drift across the land and are drawn on by battle wizards, who use it to bring down destruction on their own enemies. I don't know what is going to be relevant for us to know for the game, so that's why I'm giving you some. So that's just some generic background. Then it looks like it's going to go into just a quick page here about the Empire, and then finally we'll move into some background knowledge regarding our people that we're going to have through our game. So this should be quick. The Empire, the Shadow of the Horned Rat game takes place mainly in the region of the Old World known as the Empire. Okay, so maybe we're not going to go outside the Empire. The Empire is the largest and most powerful of all the realms of men. It lies at the center of the Old World between the World's Edge Mountains and the sea, and encompasses all the lands north of the Grey Mountains and south of the nation of Keslev in the icy north. It is a land dominated by huge rivers and deep dark forests, which are infested with all kinds of monsters and savage chaos beastmen to marauding forest goblins. They also hide the ruins of ancient elf cities. The southlands of the Empire are more civilized, with numerous cities built along the River Reich. This land, called Reichland, is the heart of the Empire. The Empire's capital city, Altdorf, is the chief center of the magical learning of the wizards coming from all over the Old World to study at the College of Magic, and we talked about that already. The Empire is also home to communities of dwarfs, whose forebears sought refuge there when the strongholds became unattainable or fell to the goblins. The dwarves have passed on a great deal of their technical knowledge, so the Empire has many skilled metalworkers and craftsmen, inventive and imaginative people who have created a bizarre arsenal of spectacular, rather unreliable weapons. The engineer school in Altdorf is the most famous of the institutions, which teaches us to develop these skills, and another is the gunnery school in Nuln, where the foremost manufacturers and artillerists come from. These are genuinely cosmopolitan places where people of many nations come together to study under the most learned men in the Old World. In the Shadow of the Horned Rat, the Empire faces the greatest threat to its existence ever yet encountered. Alright, and so that's just some generic Warhammer knowledge. Next we'll move on to introducing the Grudgebringers, which is the mercenary company which we will be playing. This will give us a little backstory so we know where we're starting, and can pick up the game from there. Okay, so I think this is working, so we'll move on to introducing the Grudgebringers. In the shadow of the Horned Rat, you assume the role of Morgan Bernhardt, the commander of the Grudgebringer mercenaries and leader of the Grudgebringer cavalry unit. Your goal is to earn the king's ransom in gold and swell the ranks of your army to become the most powerful and notorious in the land. To realize your ambitions, you must hack your way through many bloody missions offered you by wealthy patrons who pay you well to do their dirty work for them. But there is a bigger picture. As your conquests are rewarded, evidence will emerge of an evil plot within the Empire. Will you have the cunning and might to crush it? Hopefully. Alright, so Morgan Bernhardt is the eldest son of Graf Bernhardt of Nuln. His father is a wealthy and influential merchant in the ancient Reichland city, and is said to control the traffic over the 5 bridges of Nuln, including the Great Drawbridge over the Reich. He hence has something of a grip on commerce, which enters and exits Nuln, so he commands great wealth. As the tradition in Nuln, the eldest sons of the wealthy families are sent to the Officer Academy of the Great Gunnery School. Morgan Bernhardt was no exception, and he spent 4 years learning the skills of command, strategy, and leadership. He gained a reputation as a gifted yet troublesome student, graduating top of every class in which he could be bothered to attend. The study of artillery bored him senselessly, and for the young Bernhardt the glamour of the cavalry attracted him like a magnet. He could outride the Reichsguard knights who sometimes visited Nuln and in all their finery, and took great pains to goad the young lords to take part in elaborate competitions involving horses and huge sums of money whenever possible. Eventually, Morgan Bernhardt's fiery temper and unrepentant sense of misadventure was his undoing. He was thrown out of the academy for gross insubordination, dueling, and misappropriation of college funds. This was the first step along a great career as a mercenary captain. Determined to put his fighting and equine skills to the test, Bernhardt attempted to prove his right to join the Knights of the Blazing Sun, the Knights of Panther, and even the Knights of the White Wolf in Mindenheim. All refused to recognize his cleverly crafted representations of why he should be counted amongst their number, and his checkered history dogged him like a curse, catching up with him eventually wherever he went. He was even refused a place in the Empire Pistoliers, to his great chagrin and to the delight of his peers. And that's funny, because after we played Warhammer Market of the Chaos, we found out that the Empire Pistoliers are kind of a bunch of rich boys that are a little more on the rowdy side, so that's where these people tend to gather. So he was even too delinquent to fall in with their order, so that's kind of funny. Essentially, not a bad man. The young, brave Bernhardt was a slave to his ego and temper. He wanted battle, glory, honor, and riches, if only to prove to his contemporaries, whom he considered to be dull, by and large, and that he was more than their equal in every respect. And so it was. Kicking his heels in Nuln, he met with Gunther Schepke, I think is how you say it. Schepke was a hard-bidden mercenary, commanding a small but extremely tough bunch of Hellenbergs, known as Schepke 16. The name came from a now infamous battle at the Blackfire Pass some 10 years ago, when Schepke and his battle-scarred mercenaries held off 200 orcs for 5 hours, whilst the baggage train they were guarding retreated into the safety of the Empire. At the end of the battle, only 16 of Schepke's initial force of 50 survived. The greenskins were slain to a last goblin. The mercenary explained their suicidal defense of the convoy simply by the fact that theirs was a fixed-sum contract, and the money initially due for 50 would now went to the mere 16. Not only that, but the gold to pay the mercenaries rested in the rearmost wagons of the convoy, a shrewd move by the convoy's paymaster. Schepke recognized a kindred spirit in the young Bernhardt, and the few evenings of drinking and discussion soon acquainted the old soldier with Morgan's superb grasp of tactics and soldiership. "All theoretical, old man, all theoretical," lamented the drunken Morgan one evening after a lengthy session at the Kippering Herring, one of the less salubrious, I don't know what that word means, drinking houses in Nuln. So you, my young captain, you want to fight, huh?" growled Schepke, rubbing his stubbled chin thoughtfully. There's ways and means, if you really have the fire in your belly. I want to lead, explained Morgan, slamming his tankard on the table. I have the knowledge, I have the skill, and you can follow me if you will. How many years have you been scraping for a living? 5, 10, 15? Well, show me the men, and I'll put together a fighting force to shame the Reichsguard and the Panthers and the whining White Wolves of Middenheim to boot. Morgan's eyes were blazing with fury and inspired determination. Are you with me? Well, are you? Morgan slumped in his chair, drumming his fingers on the coarse wooden table. Most of the drunken warriors in the alehouse had of course been listening to the words of the Bernhardt. In fact, they could hardly miss his rousing ragings. Although Morgan's questions were addressed to Shepke, after a few moments of silence, the alehouse erupted into a hubbub of cheering and shouting. I'm with you. Count us in. We're your men. Young Morgan looked shocked and a little embarrassed by the fervor he had started, but Shepke sat back and grinned his wolfish grin. He saw the great leader in the making a rising star. Standing up, he waved the rest of the men quiet and addressed the throng. We're all fighting men, and this here is Captain Morgan Bernhardt, our leader. He is a tactical genius and a great fighter on horse and on foot. We'll do the swearing in afterwards, but those of you who are in, get to the bar. There are drinks. The drinks are on the captain. The rush for the bar was a good sign of the new men's loyalty as any could wish, and Bernhardt was left rifling through his pockets. I have not the gold to pay, he began, whispering desperately to Shepke. I see you will need someone with an eye for gold, answered Shepke, nodding sagely. He beckoned into the shadows. Let me introduce Mr. Diedrich de von Schweitzer, the canniest paymaster you are ever likely to meet on this side of the Blackfire Pass. A scrawny individual with beady eyes and long, grasping fingers edged into view, nodding as if possessed. Very good, very good. Yes, very good indeed, young Bernhardt. I know your father, you know. Clever man. Pleased to meet you. His quiet, whispering voice had a steel edge to it as he peered over the rims of his spectacles. I expect you will be needing an advance on our first jobs to pay for tonight's drinks. Let's just say this will be my affirmation of determination to our cause. After all, you will be risking your lives, while I risk that which is most precious to me, my gold. At that point, as if things could not get more unlikely, a cloaked stranger stepped forth from a darkened alcove. His robe was red, and his flaming beard matched its crimson hue. He was obviously very old and somewhat the worse for drink, but cheerily impressed nonetheless. Small sparks flickered at his fingertips, and wisps of gray smoke curled every so often from his flared nostrils. A rousing speech, young man. Well done indeed. Fiery temper in you, that's for sure. That's what we need around here. Too many fops and dandies for my liking. He narrowed his eyes conspiratorially, and his voice lowered to a whisper. Burn 'em to a crisp, I say. I can do it too, you know. At that he reared up, hiccuped, and sent a gout of flame up towards the ceiling, whilst a nimbus of sparks licked around his head. The occupants of the alehouse who were not already at the bar made for it at double speed, or left the inn by the back door. Fighting for gold was one thing. Wizards, and a drunken, bright wizard at that, was another altogether. You'll go far, mark my words, the wizard exclaimed, wagging his blazing finger sagely at Bernhardt. I only wish I were young enough to. But no matter. I've done more than enough in my time. Hold a moment. I'll be back. And with that he slumped off to his alcove, leaving glowing embers where his feet trod the wooden boards. Who in blazes? Explained Morgan. He's raving mad. He could burn the place down. Not so loud, sir. That's Darius Redhand the Third, one of the arch-wizard lords of the bright college in Altdorf. Often comes this way for a bit of local color, or so he says. Shepke's growling whisper bid his commander to be silent, and you appear to have caught his eye. The old wizard slumped back into view, carrying a scabbard. On close view, the scabbard was fashioned in black leather, so worn that any inscriptions or decoration were long since worn away. He reached Bernhardt. When he reached Bernhardt, Red Hand drew the blade, and the sound was a musical ringing that only the finest of blades could ever replicate. Runes burned on its blade, illuminating the alehouse with glorious blazing light. Red Hand waved it around vaguely for a few moments, and then sheathed the blade again, quenching its fire. Dangerous things, magical swords, always trying to get out, you know. The old wizard paused for a moment, then cleared his throat. This is a Grudgebringer, forged by the dwarves, as they all seem to be these days, a weapon of great power. Red Hand uttered the latter as if the sword expected, no, demanded the words be said, and required a formal introduction for a presence superior than any other in the alehouse. Red Hand held the scabbard out to the hesitating Bernhardt. Well, go ahead, man. Take it. You'll make better use of it than I'm going to at my age. I'm always thirsting for battle, and it's always thirsting for battle, and I've not been in one for many years now. It's only fair to free the blasted thing, though we've had some glorious times, you know. The aged wizard thrust the scabbard into Bernhardt's hands, nodding sagely, then turned and walked out of the inn. Grudgebringer demands respect, young man. He has some great powers if you treat him well. And with that last retort, he was gone into the night, leaving a swirl of sparks and embers in the air. Morgan would wonder for the rest of his life if he'd seen tears in old Red Hand's glittering eyes as he left his favorite blade behind him. And so the unlikely partnership was forged, and Grudgebringers came into existence. When Shepke's experience and Bernhardt's technical brilliance and flair for leadership, success was inevitable. At von Schweitzer's suggestion, they began campaigning in Reichland, earning a reputation as a hard-nosed bunch of very professional soldiers who achieved whatever task they were set with grim determination, and they were very rarely failed. If bonuses were offered, the Grudgebringers fulfilled the conditions to the letter. If patrons reneged on the deal, retribution was swift, violent, and just. The Grudgebringers soon became known alternatively as Bernhardt's private army, a small force of utterly professional mercenaries with their own code of honor. And back in Nuln, the aging Graf Bernhardt smiled his secret smile of pride whenever he heard the latest tales of his eldest son's ever-growing chain of victories. And with that, we will finally get started on this game, now that we have the backstory. Alright, the Book of Magic. Grudgebringer. This mighty sword has runes inscribed along the blade by a bright wizard lord. In hand-to-hand combat, the wielder has increased chance of hitting and wounding his enemies. In addition, the fireball may be cast from the sword. One fireball may be cast from the sword per magic cycle, though it may be dispelled by an enemy wizard. Potion of Strength. This potent magical brew is created from troll blood and the heart of a griffin. The character who drinks the potion will increase his strength for the duration of the entire battle. Alright. Troop roster. Grudgebringer Cavalry. Commander Bernhardt. So named after the captain's powerful sword Grudgebringer, these mercenaries have enjoyed a prosperous first year of operation, commanding an unsullied respect on their home turf in Reichland. The Grudgebringers have since marched to the troubled border princes, where they quest for a major campaign to prove themselves worthy of great fortunes. So I think that's probably retainer cost, deployment cost, experience, 12 active, 0 wounded. Let's see here, information. So this is infantry. That's Lieutenant Shepke that we already talked about. Alright. Pretty much the same story. Those are just some generic stats. What else we got here? Battle Bestiary. Oh, gosh. All right. Well, I guess this is just going to be a long episode of listening to me read. Men are numerous and powerful in the old world, and their cities are large and well fortified. Long ago, when the elves and dwarfs fought over the land, there were only a few scattered tribes of men, barbarians with almost no skill and little learning. However, once the elves and dwarves had almost destroyed each other, leaving the old world to be overrun by orcs and goblins, the tribes of the men grew and prospered. And I think that was probably the War of the Beard, I think that's what it's called. But I'm not much for Warhammer lore. That's why I'm actually reading some of this so I can get a better understanding. Today, only the men who live on the fringes of the old world can truly be called barbarians. The rest have multiplied and formed powerful nations. They have built sprawling cities and have become centers of learning and prosperity, while the elves have long since returned to their deep woods and the dwarfs to the few remaining strongholds in the world edge mountains. Of course, the old world is still a wild and dangerous place. The human nations are more fragile than they seem, their cities havens in a sea of dark terrors. These cities and armies that protect them are the chief bulwark against the invasion from the Chaos Hordes to the far north, as well as from the orc and goblin tribes that infest the whole land. These constant dangers provide considerable incentive for the human nations to work together, but ancient rivalries and territorial ambitions run deep. War between human nations is a common state of affairs, while the rebellions and uprisings can overturn nations and plunge them into civil war. Dwarves. Dwarves are immensely strong and resilient, broad in the shoulder, wide in girth, with big, thick hands and broad feet. They respect three things above all else: age, wealth, and skill. The dwarves have lived in the old world for a very long time and have always made their homes deep beneath the mountains, in the mines and the halls carved by their own hands from solid rock. This ancient dwarf empire was connected by the underground roadways, broad enough to drive carts along. The legend tells of the wealth of those days of gold and silver dug from the mountain, the fabulous jewels won from the rock, and the precious stones, marble, onyx, and jade, that adorned the halls of the dwarf kings. Each dwarf stronghold has its own king and its own hammerers, and they are amongst the best dwarf warriors. The hammerers are the king's dwarves, a body of rough fighting men who guard the king's chambers and accompany him to war. Many dwarf strongholds have deep tunnels which the dwarves have long since abandoned. These tunnels have become home to all kinds of monsters, such as night goblins, skaven trolls, and even more sinister horrors. Where old and abandoned workings join the inhabited levels, the dwarves have blocked passages and built gates, but even so they must be constantly on the lookout for intrusion from below. The iron breakers guard these old passages and protect the stronghold from attack. They spend much of their time below ground in the deepest, least visited parts of the stronghold. Because of the extreme danger of their duties, they wear heavy iron armor engraved with a rune of stone. Today only a faction of the Dwarf Empire remains in their hands. The dwarves themselves are few, and their wealth much reduced compared to their former times. Still, they remain a proud and defiant people, as grim as the mountain and as hard as the rock itself. Goblins. Like their big relatives, orcs, goblins vary in size. Although they are typically smaller than orcs, they are usually smaller than a man. Goblins have quick, nimble fingers and small, darting eyes. Their teeth are shiny and very pointed. Compared with the large, powerful bodies of the orcs, goblins look rather thin and scrawny, with gangly arms. Their voices are much higher pitched than those of orcs, and they are extremely noisy and garrulous, where orcs are inclined to speak slowly and infrequently, considering the determined glare and comparison of fangs to be sufficient communication in most situations. Goblins are more intelligent than orcs and love nothing better than I think it's supposed to be better than trading and bartering with their slow-witted relatives, because they always come out best. Goblin tribes are partially nomadic. They move around from plain to forest or along the river valleys and in between the mountain passes where they buy, sell, and steal things that they can resell to other orcs or goblins later on. Goblin tribes are often accompanied by huge caravans of scrap metal, captured monsters, and crude wooden crates, or even men, dwarves, or elves that they have trapped and enslaved. The orcs. Orcs vary in height and their physical appearance more than humans. Some are no taller than a man, but most are substantially larger, and the biggest orcs stand well over 7 feet tall. They are also much broader than humans, with big, deep chests, massive shoulders, and long, powerful armed and powerfully muscled arms. Blah. Orcs have large heads with huge jaws but tiny foreheads, behind which lurk a thick skull and not very much brain. Despite their apparent lack of intelligence, orcs are not stupid, although they are rather limited in the way that they think and act. When they are not actually at war, the orcs spend their time fighting each other to establish rights of leadership. Orc leaders are known as boss orcs, and even boss orcs fight amongst themselves to decide which of them is the overall leader. Orcs have an unusual metabolism and they can continue to grow throughout their lives. How large they grow has little to do with how much or what they eat, but more to do with their status amongst other orcs. The more important the orc, the bigger he grows, and the bigger he grows, the stronger and tougher he gets. The biggest orcs of all are the war bosses and warlords, but there are some almost equally big orcs who consider themselves just one step down from the great leader himself. These are very important orcs, and they are known as biguns. When the war boss is killed or badly wounded, the biguns who fancy their chances fight each other for leadership. The winner becomes the new war boss. Skaven. Skaven are a very diverse race. Most are smaller than a man, no more than 4 or 5 feet tall, and quite slightly built. Others, in particular the elite storm vermin, are anywhere up to 6 feet tall and heavily built with thick necks and heavily muscled shoulders. Larger Skaven usually fight their way into positions of authority unless they are particularly stupid or lazy, becoming chieftains and eventually warlords unless they lose one of the battles for supremacy along the way. The rank of different Skaven can often be distinguished by their fur color. Assassins and giant storm vermin usually have black fur, considered to be a mark of a pure killer in Skavendom. White or gray fur denotes great leaders or wielders of magical power, while the bulk of the Skaven have reddish brown fur or piebald type markings. Skaven have average to poor eyesight, but their night sight is very good. Skaven lairs are usually sparsely lit, just by the occasional smoking torch or a crackling brazier. I don't know. To give the Skaven the minimal amount of light they need to see by. Their hearing and sense of smell are excellent, making them very difficult to take by surprise, and they are especially good at fighting at night or underground. Skaven's slaves are used in battle en masse to overwhelm and demoralize the foe by increasing the apparent size of a Skaven horde. Skaven slave regiments are made up of the dregs of society, slaves too unskilled or stupid to be put to better use elsewhere. Nearly all Skaven slaves used in war are Skaven from clans which have been defeated and enslaved in internecine clan warfare. Alright. Woo! I think we're done. Let's finally select a mission.
I have spoken to the elder of the hamlet. Schnappelberg needs hired thugs for protection from orc and goblin raiding parties. It is known that greenskins have established a camp somewhere in this area. 4 nearby villages have been pillaged in the last 3 weeks. The locals live in fear of an attack. We will be stationed in this forsaken backwater for 2 weeks. During this time, it will be our duty to protect the peasants and their property.
2 weeks will give you enough time to find us more work. Perhaps something that pays a little better. I'm tired of risking my life for peasants and ale money.
Engage! Charge! Enemy sighted.
Yes, my lord.
Engage!
Yes, my lord. Yes, my lord.
Hold! Engage!
Yes, my lord.
Engage! Charge! Charge! Mission complete.
Yes, my lord.
Just not sure if I assume with that screaming that the fireball can hurt your own guys, like you can get friendly fire. And that twinkling is
Yes, my lord.
okay. Let's see how that does. Mission complete. You eliminate all enemy. Regiment 0 killed. Your infantry found the Sword of Might. Meanwhile, the Cursed City of Skaven Blight, the Grey Sealer tactical harnesses the power of the Warpstone to create his latest monstrosity.
Cleanse, acts of kill, carnage, yes. Curse the blade. All that will be pleased, and call will roll.
Alright, I'm going to call it quits here for the day. I hope you're enjoying these videos. If you are, please give my channel a like and subscribe to encourage me to post more content for you. And thanks again to the subscriber that gifted this game to the channel, so we're able to see this retro game, and I'm able to relive some of my childhood and see if I've made any, Oh, what is this? Reinforcements. Okay. Does that cost me money? No, it just gives them to me, it looks like. I don't know what this wounded is all about. How long are they wounded for? Because I'd almost rather them just die and then we replace them than to have wounded people, but alright, relive some of my childhood here. We'll see if we've made some improvements. So, thanks again for watching and have a great day.